everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our Tune In Tuesday webinar. I'm Kelly Cordero.
And I'm Erica Flores. And before we get started, we wanted to share the following with you. If you haven't already, we invite you to visit our website, join our listserv, and be sure to follow us on Twitter.
We also want to share our contact information with you. And we encourage you to reach out to our Long Island L.I.RBERN resource specialists via email if we can support you in any way.
We also invite you to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel, where you can find recordings of past webinars and instructional snapshots. And at this time, again, we want to invite everyone to sign into the chat using your first and last name, district, and title so that we can confirm attendance and provide CTLE credit.
So for those of you who have joined us before, you know that during this time of distance learning, the Long Island L.I.RBERN has been having weekly meetings. We're meeting on Tuesdays for Tune In Tuesdays, and again on Fridays for Follow-Up Fridays. So we wanted to focus this week on social emotional health, the needs of our students, and also our own needs. So on Friday, we will have an amazing speaker with us, Dorina Sackman-Ebois, talking about how we as educators are being mindful of our own emotional health during this time of distance learning and isolation. So please be sure to register for our Follow-Up Friday. It'll be 12 noon this Friday, May 15th. And you see there is a link there that you can use to register for that on my learning plan. But today we're starting that conversation about social emotional health and well-being, focusing on our students' experiences during COVID-19 and distance learning. So we're very excited to have with us today Judie Haynes as our guest speaker on this topic. Judie is a former ESL teacher with 28 years of classroom experience. She is the author and co-author of 8 books, the most recent being Teaching to Strengths, Supporting Students Living with Trauma, Violence, Living with Trauma, Violence, and Chronic Stress. Judie writes a monthly blog for TESOL, and she is the co-founder and co-moderator of L-Chat on Twitter, which is a very popular forum for discussion and sharing of resources.
And Judie is joining us today to discuss the topic of supporting L's social emotional learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you have any comments or questions for Judie throughout the presentation, feel free to enter them in the chat and we will address them as time permits. So without further ado, welcome Judie. We are turning the presentation over to you.
Hello, I'm Judie Haynes and I'm here today to talk to you about supporting English learners' social emotional learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. As was said, I'm the founder and co-moderator of L-Chat on Twitter, and every day I'm interacting with teachers from all over the world. During the last 6 weeks, the L-Chat topics were based on COVID-19 and English learners. If you Google L-Chat archives, you can go back and look at all of these if you'd like. In order to write the questions for the chat, I've had to do a lot of research. Anything that comes out that's written about COVID-19 and students, and I noticed that a lot of what is being said is based on the social emotional learning of these children and what's going on. Next. We have 3 anchor questions that we're going to be looking at today. How is the pandemic affecting English learners? Why is the educator's mindset important? And how do we support English learners' social emotional learning during COVID-19 pandemic? These will be the things that we'll be looking at during this workshop. Next. let's talk about what we mean when we use the terms trauma and chronic stress. Developmental psychologist Hiro Yokoshima and educator Susan Craig define them as such. We see that trauma is a response to an experience that is so stressful that it overwhelms an individual's capacity to cope, causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes a person's sense of self, and their ability to feel a full range of emotions and experiences. And chronic stress is described as a physiological state of hypervigilance, of hyperarousal that can result in chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, and limit in regulating behavior. And I think you'll all agree that you can see the chronic stress in students right now. Next. Think about this. What percentage of students are you working with who live with trauma or chronic stress? Would you please write a percentage in the chat box?
So I see we're getting responses ranging from 20% to 100%.
Okay. Well, according to the National Survey of Children's Health, almost half, or 50%, of the nation's children have experienced one or more types of serious childhood trauma. Regardless of where we work and what we do, an epic number of students are living with adverse childhood experiences. Nowadays, I think your 100% is probably pretty true. English learners experience all of these traumas, as well as some that are specific to their unique experiences. And here are the experiences that are unique to everybody. These are from ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, that affect the social emotional growth of all children. And in addition to this list, there are many experiences that affect our students. For example, a parent who's deployed, loss of employment, homelessness, and children and families with PTSD due to catastrophic childhood illnesses. So this, what you see in front of you there is not an exhaustive list. But if you go and you Google ACEs, you'll be able to see their total list. All right, but in addition to the previous list, you have some distinct experiences for English learners, and things like fear of accessing benefits, and we're going to discuss that a little bit more, extreme poverty, fear of being deported, a new country, new language, no voice to express their pain, natural disasters. As a matter of fact, 60% of all English learners in the United States live in extreme poverty. New immigration policies that will keep many immigrants, I'm sorry, this skipped ahead on me, from getting a green card, will keep many immigrants from getting a green card if they use public assistance such as Medicaid or food stamps. What makes this population noteworthy are not just these differences or distinctions, but also that they have no voice to tell us their pain. A lot of immigrants that we have in this country, their parents may not speak English. So we want to think about that as we're going through this webinar. Next. COVID-19 is the #1 new trauma for all students, but especially difficult for English learners and their families. Why? Why do you think this is especially difficult for English learners? Write in the chat box.
So I see a lot of responses regarding the living conditions, living in tight quarters, language barrier, no medical insurance, loss of jobs, loss of income, isolation, um, so many different experiences.
Oh, great response, everybody. I think
Mhm.
that you were looking at my slides that are coming up because a lot of that I'm going to discuss. Okay, the next slide. Teachers have reported that although some families knew school was closed, they were not aware of a lot of other things that were going on. For example, it was found that a lot of families didn't have basic information about COVID-19 and what to do if they got sick. They didn't know the rules about social distancing and wearing masks. They didn't know about online learning and how to access it. And they also didn't know that they were entitled to resources such as food and health care and to know what was available to them. So the first thing that we need to do is to help make sure our families know all this stuff. I think this is more of a problem in cities than it would be maybe in a suburban area. Next slide. Immigrant families have additional stressors because a lot of them lost income and they really don't have any resources or backup as far as savings or things like that. Their inability to speak the language, speak English, lack of family or community support. Many undocumented immigrants don't have the support of a community of other immigrants or whatever. There's kind of a divide in many cases between undocumented families and documented families. If they are working, they're afraid of being infected, and the reluctance to access healthcare due to ICE activity. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act provides free coronavirus testing for the uninsured. However, it does not cover coronavirus treatment. The CARES Act provides $1 billion to hospitals to treat the uninsured, but it doesn't exempt patients from cost sharing or physicians' bills. So many immigrants are alarmed by the out-of-pocket medical costs, and many undocumented immigrants will wait to seek care until their symptoms are life-threatening. Next. Why is it important for teachers of English learners to support social-emotional learning online? Now more than ever, our children need to know that they are safe and that someone cares about them. Children are feeling stressed and are dealing with the fear and trauma of COVID-19. And I found from interviewing and training teachers across the US that most teachers have little experience teaching students who are living with trauma and chronic stress. And most ELLs would fall into this category at this point in time. Just the stress of being able to get online to go to a class. And the teachers are stressed on the other hand because in some places they can't find all their students. They don't have Wi-Fi and they don't have any device. So there are all those things that add to everyone's stress. Next. English learners are at a higher risk for social and emotional problems at this time. First of all, children in general are more vulnerable to the emotional impact of traumatic events that disrupt their daily lives. And English learners are thought to be at higher risk than their general education peers for social emotional problems. If you think about a student that you had before the coronavirus happened, you might find the truth in that statement. Just the fact that there's a language problem and the stress of moving, or maybe the stress of where they moved from and what was going on in their home country, makes ELLs really at a higher risk. English learners with prior trauma are even at a higher risk. So if you think of a student and you realize they had prior trauma, they're even a higher risk at this point. Um, the COVID-19 crisis exacerbates the prior insecurities about undocumented family members. Fear of being arrested by ICE. Excuse me. More than 800 public health and legal experts have urged ICE to confirm that healthcare facilities won't be targeted for enforcement actions earlier this month. They voiced concerns that the prospect of being arrested in a medical facility might dissuade immigrants from seeking care they need, and which amid the pandemic could pose a threat to overall health. Next. English learners are also at a higher risk for social emotional problems because they lack access to critical information, and that's been apparent during the pandemic. Remote learning is deepening the inequalities for students who do not have access to technology, and this has become a nationwide realization. When I talk to people from all over the US in LChat or whatever, this is something that comes across very loud and clear. As we said before, families fear to access social services, including health and food services, because they're a fear of being tracked, especially if they're not undocumented, and fear of going to the hospital.
Judy, if I could just add to your comments there, we have a comment that came in the chat just saying, you know, the added stress of testing positive for COVID or gaining access to the free testing that's being made available, where people are asked to provide a social security number or provide state ID. So
Right.
It just highlights the comments that you just made. But someone offered that Sepa Mujer helped some of their families. So this may be a resource that's, if you have additional
Very good,
information
thank
that you
you.
can provide in the chat about Sepa Mujer, if you have any contact information, that might be a resource worth sharing with our students.
Okay, that's very good. All right, and lots of times in New Jersey, where I live, when people they need to have a doctor's prescription. Even if they have symptoms, they need a doctor's prescription to go and get the test. This was over, not so much now, but over the past 6 weeks. And a lot of times, your students who are undocumented won't go to the doctors. They don't have a doctor. And so they don't have a prescription and they don't know where to go from there. Next. As you can see, this slide is from a pre-coronavirus presentation. And you know, my goal here is ways to support English learners' social emotional development. These are things teachers can do. And I've crossed out the items that are key to supporting the development of social emotional learning, but we can't really do easily. So that means that teachers need to adjust. That's why I showed this slide, because teachers need to adjust the way they are supporting and developing their English learners' social emotional development. We have to come up with new ideas for ways to do this. Next. Okay, these are ways to support development when students aren't in school. First of all, setting up a teaching space that is inviting from remote learning. I talked to one teacher in Massachusetts who set up a space in his in a room that will be the space he uses every day. And he brought some things from his classroom that he could put in the background. So the class had a pet, a turtle pet, and he put that in the background so everybody could see that pet. He plays the guitar in class a lot, and he put his guitar there so they could see familiar things. So that was one of the ways that reduce the stress that children have. Personalized greetings, asking English learners how they're feeling, saying hello to each child as they come in, or or as they leave. And one of the things teachers mentioned a lot was that they had to rebuild relationships. Technology use for remote learning can whittle away at the human connection that exists in a brick and mortar classroom. We all know that remote teaching will never replace face-to-face. It's especially important with your English learners who feel they have a connection to you. So if possible, make sure you have ways to further that connection. Design activities that help English learners express their feelings. Whole class meetings where they can interact with each other. If you're on Zoom, and I don't think a lot of schools are actually on Zoom, but if you are, you can, my daughter is a teacher and she's special ed, and she can put the kids in small groups in breakout rooms so that they can interact, and she can just go through and check on what they're doing. They get an assignment and whatever, and they need activities where they can discuss their feelings. Next. All right. I can't go into this too much today, but asset-based learning will help foster your English learners' feeling of safety. Acknowledge of their personal, social, cultural, and life experiences is a way to help them feel safe. So we want to make sure that we're using that kind of language. If a student doesn't have access to technology, stay in touch with them through text and phone calls. Many teachers have told me that even if the parents don't have technology, most have a cell phone. And it's really hard for the kids to do homework and whatever on a cell phone, but at least it's a way to keep a connection. Have English learners journal every day. Entries can be written accounts, photos, or drawings. I really love this idea because I feel that people 10 years from now can look at what they wrote and it has some kind of social significance, and there'll be things left that can be passed down in families. People don't realize it. I didn't realize myself really, because I could have been journaling what I'm doing. It would have been a boring journal, but basically it would have been interesting maybe for people to see. And journaling is a great way to have students keep record of what's going on in their lives during this momentous time in history. Teach students positive self-talk. I'm going to talk about this a little more later, but it's a way for students to flip negative feelings by looking at the positives and to have an internal dialogue that they can depend on. So if you model how you self-talk and you flip your negative thoughts by looking at the positives, an example would be, one teacher told me, she said, "I'm nervous about teaching online. I haven't done this before, and I know I will make mistakes." Let students know that it's okay to make mistakes and that you all learn how to do this together. And express how excited you are to learn a new skill. This is the 11 I just stuck on there at the last minute because the teacher told me on Twitter that she had sent 100 and some postcards to all of her students. She was a high school science teacher, and they were individualized, and it took her so many days to do it, but she wanted to make that contact with every student, that personal contact, to let them know that she was missing them. Next. All right, social emotional learning and role play. This is usually a huge thing to do when you're in a classroom, is to have kids role play something that will, in a troubling situation. It's a little harder to do on when you're not in the same building as the kids, if you're not in the same room. So we have to be really inventive here and think of ways to have kids divide into groups, um, and, and ways that will help English learners develop empathy and understand other people's feelings, and giving them the language to express those feelings. One teacher I know wrote about a student that was very fearful of getting the coronavirus. And the teacher asked him, what would you tell a friend who was afraid of the virus? And this allowed the child to step out of his own fear and talk about what he would tell somebody else. Can anyone suggest topics that would lend themselves to remote learning? Please write in the chat box.
So we already have so many great ideas coming through, and I want to thank everyone who is sharing what they're doing with their students to provide that level of social emotional support. So I see newsletters that are being sent out in home language and in English with pictures, with stickers being mailed out, being shared digitally. So many great opportunities for students to have that sense of connection, whether student to student or student to teacher. And we know that that is critically important at this time. We have teachers who are visiting students to drop off little care packages with materials or just to touch base and make that connection. Screencastify daily videos to check in. So many great ideas. Thank you for everyone who is sharing. And just so you know, because so many great ideas are coming in and being shared through the chat, we will be going through the chat transcript after today's webinar, and we will share that information with you. So if there are ideas that are coming through, you have that. Just, we learn so much from our colleagues, what other people are doing to support students during this time. Virtual field trips, science journal, class snack. Oh, I like that one. Class snack and hangout time. Flipgrid.
Yeah, my daughter does. She has a lunch.
Yeah.
And she invites
great.
Kids that just drop in and have lunch with her.
Mindfulness videos, making videos to send to kids so that they know that they're being thought of, that their teacher is thinking of them. So many great ideas. So we will be sharing all of that. So you have this information, what your colleagues are doing, just to spark some ideas. So thank you. Keep it coming. We will be sharing all of that.
I think this is a good time for me to say something that I've expressed on some of the other podcasts and stuff that I've done during the last 6 weeks, and it's that I haven't been in the classroom in a while, but I'm still very involved with the ESL in New Jersey, TESOL, and National TESOL and whatever, and I'm still writing about English learners and strategies and whatever. But reading all this, and you see it right there, Kelly, of what you just talked about, it makes me feel so proud to be part of this profession. The teachers have come through and just blown everybody away with the things that you were just talking about. It's just amazing, and I thank you all. It's just,
yes.
I know it's
echo
overwhelming.
that
So you're
sentiment,
feeling
Judie.
stressed, but basically, this is a wonderful thing that you're doing.
You're right, Judie. Our teachers have really just risen to this challenge of supporting our students in so many ways. I see yoga coming in, all these different ways that go above and beyond supporting them academically or linguistically to really show their passion for supporting the social emotional well-being of our students. And I think you're absolutely right. It's really a time of pride to be an ESOL educator and see what teachers are doing in support of their students.
Absolutely. And that includes teachers, classroom teachers or subject area teachers who have English learners in their class. But I'm so proud, and I get this sense with all the teachers that I contact and I read on LChat every day, the things that they're doing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And if you want a lot of good ideas, you should go on to the regular, not the chat part, but the Twitter stream that's called LChat and see all the things that teachers are posting. It's amazing. All right, we're going to go on to the next slide. I wanted to talk about benefits of English learners of positive self-talk. I mentioned that briefly in a few slides back, but I think I have students, or I help them either in their first language or in English, to think about and use a dialogue to make sense of real life situations. And one of the reasons I got into this was that I was writing, using a bullying program that my school had devised, and I was writing about it for a TESOL publication. And I found it was very successful when students created a response to a bullying situation, and they illustrated that response, and they put in what their answer would be to the bully in a thought bubble. And to me, that was such a powerful thing, to have kids have something in their head. I am smart, I am good, I'm hardworking. Some kind of mantra that they can tell themselves when they feel they're feeling down or depressed or upset about something that's happening to them in their life. So I think that it helps them explore and investigate and experiment with ideas and emotion, and deepens their awareness of themselves and expresses their ideas and feelings. And I feel it's a really important thing that you can use to develop social emotional awareness. And basically, I must say that it may not work with very young children, but I even had made it work with kids whose English was very limited. Somebody from the same language group explained what we were doing, and they were able to write their ideas in their own language. And I invited all of them to write in their own language so that the mantra would become meaningful to them. Next. All right, this is something we all do, linking literature and literary characters to students' lives. If you can go back now and find literature that was written about a hurricane or a tornado or some other natural disaster, you might have something that can help kids deal with what's going on now. An example of this literature, of linking literature to literary characters, an elementary teacher, Mrs. Lee, told me that she chose a chapter book, Tornado, by Newbery Medal-winning author Betsy Byers. At the start of the book, there's a storm coming, a tornado, and a mother, her 2 sons, and a hired farmhand named Pete hid in a tornado shelter. The father didn't make it to the shelter, and he was out in the area, in the farmland. While the tornado rages outside, Pete tells the boys a story from his youth. The story helps pass the time and also distracts them from what they're hearing outside. And it also distracts them from worry about the father and who wasn't in the shelter with them. So I think stories like this help students talk about their fears and or talk about what they would do in a situation. When they get out of the shelter, they end up finding that their dog was totally safe, which was a good thing, and that their father was okay. But while they were in there, which was a pretty substantial amount of time, this was a huge worry. And so this is the book she suggested. I think it's about maybe a 3rd grade book. Next. Another thing I'd like to tell everybody is to practice teacher self-care. I know you're going to hear about this on Friday, but I wanted to say a little bit about it. Because at the end of March, the Collaborative for Social, Emotional, and Academic Learning, known as CASEL, launched a survey to unpack the emotional lives of teachers during COVID-19 crisis. 5,000 teachers responded to the survey given by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence And they had these 5,000 answers in just a few days, so you know how strongly teachers felt about it. The top 5 emotions that they felt were anxious, fearful, worried, overwhelmed, and sad. And this really, when I read this report, it really struck a chord with me, because on Twitter and talking to teachers that I used to work with, or people that are in my professional group, I knew that all of this was true. And so, and the teachers were worried, because they worried about whether friends or family would be affected by the virus. They were double stressed a lot, this was a big thing, of teaching online and taking care of their families. And this has been a major theme throughout the last 6 weeks. And basically, what a lot of people who are not in the field don't realize is, because I know in many cases, the teachers are obliged to teach their original face-to-face curriculum. They have to cover that material. And what they don't realize, what people don't realize, is in order to cover that material, it has to be totally rewritten so that it can be used online and presented in a way that will keep kids involved and interested. So this was the report. And I think if you look at it, you can see that we all felt these emotions. I feel these emotions just from hearing people talk about it. One of the things that became apparent was that, next slide, I'm sorry, the next slide. Apparent were how anxiety affects the teacher who is doing all this work. All right, first of all, the author of this study said that before the pandemic, America's teachers were already burning out, adding a new expectation to becoming distant learning experts to support uninterrupted learning for all of their students and caring for the overwhelming, ever-evolving demands of their own families. And it's no surprise that 95% of the feelings they reported recently are rooted in anxiety. I'm sorry, I'm having a little problem getting to the rest of the text. So first of all, anxiety affects the attention that it's very easy to sit here and listen to me talk and just kind of zoom out because of anxiety. It affects your memory and how well you recall things. It affects decision-making, and that can affect your students quite a lot. And it affects relationship building and your own health. So we want to try and grab some positive emotions like joy and curiosity, and promote greater engagement with our positive emotions. And I think everybody has these problems at some point, and we do things that will bring us up. For me, it's maybe getting on Zoom and talking to a friend. Mm-hmm. or my family. It raises my mood immediately.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Judie, I'm just thinking of one of my favorite expressions, that you have to Maslow before you bloom. And I think that just ties right into all of that. Just, not just for our students. It's so true for our students to remember that, but for ourselves as well, because we have to think of the quality of the instruction that we're bringing into, to our students. And without taking care of ourselves and our own emotional needs, we're not ready for that task. So that's such an important point. Thank you for that.
Right. Well, I think if teachers are anxious in the classroom, virtual or face-to-face, English learners, especially those with a high level of stress themselves, may not feel safe to learn. And that seems like a pretty drastic comment. But I think we all have to try and kind of shield our students from what we're feeling. And hopefully it doesn't come across when you're teaching remotely, but it's really hard to do. And even in dealings with my family, sometimes I felt depressed on Mother's Day. I'm sure most of you who are mothers understand that, because I couldn't see my kids, my grandkids. It was really very depressing, and I had a big dip in my emotional life that day. So teachers need to take time every day for themselves to safeguard their own emotional health. And I wanted to ask here, I'm sure some of you already said this, but what do you do to relieve stress? What are some of the things that you do?
I love one comment made here by Janet, just saying that she creates time for her teachers to touch base with each other and with her. So it's not just providing, that digital space for our students to be making those connections, but Janet, that's such a
great
wonderful way.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's a great
supporting your teachers. I love
Yeah,
that.
we're meeting on Friday evenings, and I'm inviting them to bring a glass of wine, a needle and thread, and an old T-shirt. And we've come up with some really interesting math, and they are loving it because they're able to interact with each other and also take the edge off of what they're doing every day, which, like Judy's saying, is very stressful, not just for the students, but for all of our teachers.
We have a lot of people getting outside too, bike riding, walking, just breathing, something as simple as breathing, drumming, exercising, reading, getting outside, cooking, playing with the kids. So all of these great things. Someone got a puppy. That has got to be the best advice.
Oh, that had to be great.
Highly recommended. If you can get a puppy, a little COVID puppy, I highly recommend it. Just being outside. I know our weather has been a little sketchy, but as soon as you see that sun shining, it really is so important. It can change your whole mindset for just processing what's going on now and being more valuable to our students when we return.
And I don't know about on Long Island, but in New Jersey, northern New Jersey right now, it's beautiful out. Next slide. Teachers also expressed in this study that I was telling you about the need for honesty, respect, kindness, flexibility, and patience from their school administrators. More realistic expectations. I talked about that some schools are insisting that they teach the whole curriculum, and we all know that that is really not possible. And including boundaries around working around the clock, because I know some people don't finish work, or they go online to have the chats and everything after dinner. Strategies to support their own and their students' wellness and resilience. These are all things that teachers feel a need for. Can you write in the chat box what you feel a strong need for?
We need a day off. Human interaction. Yes, we value that more than ever now that we're missing it so much.
Right.
And I think, Judy, just speaking to that point you made about boundaries, people are pointing out just having that structured day where there is a time where you walk away from it, turn everything off. I know that was difficult for me in the beginning to set those boundaries, because my office is my kitchen now. My kitchen is always open.
Absolutely.
Mental breaks. People are looking for boundaries and structure, more of a schedule, conversations with students, and time for self-care.
Well, one of the things that I didn't put on here is that also the kids need brain breaks. They need to get up and move around or whatever. If you have a group of kids and you have them stand up and deep breathe and do some yoga or something, depending on the size of the group you might have on your screen, but they need brain breaks too.
We also have someone who just made the comment, and I know that this is a real concern for many people, that their district does not allow them to use Zoom or video conference. So that really adds to that level of isolation and separation from students. So does anybody have any suggestions, or is anyone in that situation where they're not allowed to use platforms such as Zoom? And how are you connecting with your students or finding
Well,
ways?
please write that in the box, people.
Yes.
Yes, that's a very good question. I also would like to know how long you think that your students can be in a lesson without just zoning out.
20 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. Lots of different estimates, and that could vary, I guess, depending on the
Grade level, yes.
grade level and age of our students.
People were telling me yesterday on LChat last night, they were telling me that 15 minutes for kindergarten kids.
Mm.
And then maybe another 15 minutes with the parents to help them learn how to do whatever the kids need to learn.
And that was actually another comment that came up in the chat, just the importance of those connections with parents during this time too. So whether it's supporting them in helping their children access these digital platforms, or just touching base with the parents to see, you know, what they may need, the type of support that we may be able to offer them at this time as well.
Good. And the next slide has my information on it. I've listed here that on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, we have an hour chat on a predetermined topic. And anyone that would like to come in, we're still discussing COVID-19 related topics. And you can go and look at the archives. If you Google LChat archives, you'll see all the chats we've had on COVID-19, which is, I think this is probably our 6th or 7th one coming up next week. And also my most recent book and my email address if you have any questions.
Well, we still have some time remaining. So does anyone have any questions for Judie? Throw them in the chat and we can try and address one or two of them. But we also want to thank you, Judie, for spending this time with us today. And we will be recording, or we are recording this session, and so it will be available later on this week on our website and YouTube channel if anyone joined us late or had to leave early, or if you want to share it with your colleagues and friends.
And I see that there's a request if anybody has any strategies that have been working for them to support social emotional learning for our students, if you want to share that in the chat. As I said, we will be going through the whole chat transcript and sharing all of these comments and resources with you after today's session.
Good. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming and listening to me. And I hope that you learned something, or maybe not if you didn't learn anything, but it reinforces what you already thought or did.
So again, just thank you, Judie, so much. Toward the end of Judie's presentation, she actually ended up on that topic of teacher self-care, which ties right into our follow-up Friday topic. So again, we want to just invite you to join us Friday, 5:15 at 12 p.m. when we will have Dorina Sackman-Egwa with us, a special guest speaker, and she's going to be focusing on transformative emotional intelligence and the resilient Long Island educator. I love her topic. She's a really, really dynamic speaker, and it's really focusing on our self-care. You know, what are we doing for ourselves as educators during
I think I'm going to come to that.
Oh, she's fabulous. I highly recommend it.
Is that also at 2 o'clock?
It is at noon on Friday.
Okay.
Registration is now open on my learning plan. I've included the link there.
I love the stuff she does on her podcast.
Everything she does is wonderful, and her passion is contagious. But
Right,
again,
right.
Judy, I just want to point out again, the L chat on Twitter, a tremendous resource. If you're not on Twitter, you need to get on there and just take advantage of all of these conversations, slow chats, resources that are being shared. It's really such a tremendous support during this time, but really always.
Teachers are sharing the work that they do, sheets that they use for kids that don't have any technology. They're sharing everything. They're sharing webinars. There's been so many webinars the last few weeks that
Yes, the
all
level of
that is shared,
generosity
all
is,
free.
yeah, free and generous. So
Right.
it's been really amazing how
Which is-
everybody has really just come together to support each other. It's
Yes.
really wonderful.
And I think that's what we were talking about before, the
Absolutely.
way that teachers have met the challenge of what is going on now and what has to be done.
Right.
And so before we go, we would also like to remind you to return to my learning plan to complete the evaluation for today's webinar, and also to check for other upcoming professional development opportunities with the Long Island R.BERN, which also includes that Friday session with Dorina. And we thank you so much for joining us today.